and our objective really is to make blockchain more tangible. We're trying to achieve that by demonstrating the application towards a carbon credit system. And the format will be that we are providing a brief presentation of like 10-15 minutes of each of our subjects. And then we would like to open up the floor for a Q&A and a discussion session. So we really want to keep it as short as possible. For that, we would like to ask you, in case you have specific questions towards slides, please feel free to interrupt the presentation, but otherwise just write them down and then we will answer them during the Q&A. So the first presenter will be Rachel from the World Bank, which will be presenting the warehouse concept that the World Bank has developed and is currently exploring, and will also present other pilots of blockchain applications. The second presenter will be myself. I'll be representing the Blockchain for Climate Foundation, which is enabling a transparent and efficient transfer of mitigation outcomes at the government, at the country level of the Paris Agreement. And the last presenter will be Neil, who is enabling the Chinese private sector to purchase and participate in carbon offset projects using a blockchain application as well. So with this being said, I would like to give the floor to Rachel, and yeah, please take it away.
Thank you. So my name's Rachel, and I come from more of a policy background. I'm in the carbon markets and innovation practice. So as Marco mentioned, I mainly work in the Climate Warehouse program, but we're also working very closely with the IT Technology and Innovation Lab within the bank to explore how blockchain and other types of technologies can help us facilitate the next generation of climate markets under Article 6. And I think before I start, I want people to raise their hands if they think they're fairly confident about what blockchain actually is. Okay, so I guess I should give a bit of introduction to that. And who here kind of knows what it is, but is skeptical of its potential? Okay, so lots of people to persuade. Okay, so I guess in a nutshell, what blockchain is essentially a form of recording information very securely because through immutability, and also because it's encrypted, and it's also kind of recorded in the form of decentralized nodes or computers rather than one single central node. And it's normally referred to as the technology of trust because it allows you and me to transact information, not necessarily money, but some form of information without the middleman. So that's in a nutshell. I know I could have gone on for like 10 more minutes about it, but that's all I can do for now. So just a bit of context. World Bank has a report called the State and Trends, which was launched this morning actually, and it showed that there's a continued momentum for carbon pricing around the world. I think there's more than 50 carbon pricing initiatives, subnationally, nationally, and regionally as well. And also, I think there's 88 countries that have noted in their NDCs that they want to use carbon pricing to achieve their targets. And Article 6 also provides the potential basis for market transactions by allowing parties to transfer mitigation outcomes internationally. And what's really interesting is that it didn't specify where necessarily these mitigation outcomes have to come from, so it could potentially open the door for a much broader range of programs and policies that could engage and generate mitigation outcomes. So we think at the World Bank, if these bottom-up cooperation, these decentralized linkages are designed well, it could potentially lower costs and increase ambition to achieve the Paris goal that we want. And that's all well and good, but it's still very complicated. When we look at a market scheme, it has different legal frameworks, technologies, governance, and this figure here just shows generally what a transaction registry would look like, but we have to keep in mind that each market mechanism has very different functions and systems, and it would be very complicated to think about how do you trade these assets and make them fungible. And beyond current market challenges, there's also additional challenges post-2020. So every country, I think we all know, not just developed countries, have an NDC target. So you want to engage in international transfers, there needs to be a national registry to make sure that there's no double counting. And there's also potentially a need for an international settlement platform to track trades and account reconciliations to, again, avoid double counting or other types of fraudulent behavior. And there also needs to be a common language for registries to communicate with each other and make sure that assets are fungible. So that's a bit of the background, and I wanted to give you a broad overview of what our program does. So our program is divided into 4 functions. The first one is on how do we create mitigation outcomes by applying MRV methodologies and quantification methods. And we leverage a lot of the existing efforts that's already out there, like CDM, gold standard, and so on. And we focus on creating these mitigation outcomes from our own lending operation. And as you can see on this slide, there's around 30 billion of investment per year with climate co-benefits, of which 20 billion has mitigation co-benefits. And that's a huge potential for us to leverage our existing lending to see if we can pilot these MRV methodologies to generate market-ready mitigation outcomes. And another benefit of that is that we benefit from the due diligence that's already being carried out by the World Bank to help us reduce that project risk too. So the second component, which I'll focus on, is the climate warehouse infrastructure. So once these mitigation outcomes are created, they have to be stored in a transparent way so that for the supplier it's beneficial because they might not have decided at the outset whether they want to use these mitigation outcomes for international transfers or do they want to use it for NDC compliance. So when they haven't made that decision yet, here's a inventory where you can store that information to be decided later. And for the buyer, that's really beneficial as well because there's a one-stop shop where you can compare and evaluate different mitigation outcomes from different systems using different filters and based on your different priorities. And then the third component is the buy side. So we're working with MEGA and Treasury to explore what sort of innovative financial instruments could be out there to help lower the risk for buyers and kind of encourage some early action. And then the fourth part is an overarching enabling environment. So we do a lot of analytical pieces and we engage in informal dialogues on Article 6 to see what's really required to enable that framework for markets post-2020. So just a bit more details on what the climate warehouse is. So it has 4 components. The first is a database, which reflects a pipeline of potential projects. And these emission reductions from identified projects are MRV'd and quantified, and a unique feature is that these assets would be independently assessed using a tool called the Mitigation Action Assessment Protocol. And we think this is really important because with assets, as I mentioned, looking so diverse, there needs to be a way to standardize, assess them, and against some benchmarking criteria, say environmental integrity, sustainable development benefits, financial structure, management entity. So this helps us encourage and enable this bottom-up environment, but at the same time allow a way to compare them more transparently. And then the second function is in the warehouse allows for registry sub-accounts. And this is for countries that may not have a registry yet, and they could hopefully benefit from leveraging an existing infrastructure. And then the third function is the meta registry, and this is what the blockchain pilot focuses on. So how can we reflect information from existing registries like from Gold Standard, Vera, CDM, and so on, and also reflect the information from those registry sub-accounts within the warehouse. And then the fourth component, which we would explore at a later stage, is whether this warehouse could have exchange functions as well. And hopefully with the meta registry, there would be some very transparent filters so that the buyers can sort of shop through it based on their priorities like sustainable development and so on. So this is a diagram that shows us when we're thinking through this internally, what it might look like using blockchain to develop such a climate warehouse. So key points are there's no central node, so there's no like one platform where all the registries link to, but rather each entity has their own node or computer. And they would try to extract the most important information that they want to be included in the warehouse, and this would be hashed securely using blockchain. And as you can see here, the diagram categorizes the nodes by type of the warehouse participant. So we envision this warehouse would be open to a broad range of users eventually, like UN agencies or even voluntary registries and MDBs and so on. And each participant would then hypothetically build their own API to reflect the information in the warehouse. And this slide here just shows what we built, what we call a quick and dirty prototype internally. And it just shows that it looks exactly the same as other systems. Blockchain is just the underlying technology. And here's the findings so far. We do think that blockchain has some potential because, first of all, the immutability, the fact that it has encryption could help increase the security of the transaction of information. And the fact that it's decentralized means that there's no single point of failure. So it's not just one central system that we are relying on, but rather each country has, or each entity has their own node. And I think, again, it's also important to mention that beyond blockchain, there's other technologies that we must consider as well. Blockchain, a big saying is garbage in, garbage out. So if your data is rubbish, blockchain can't address that. So we need to look at, say, Internet of Things or AI to help make the MRV process more efficient and more kind of secure as well. But we also recognize that there's lots of challenges that we still have to think through. So firstly, the regulatory and governance framework. Blockchain by itself can't prevent duplicating records from being added to the meta registry from different sources. There still needs to be a way, there still needs to be some form of oversight to make sure that data flow is managed well. And also another complicated thing is that legal frameworks for blockchain differs from country to country. So how does that work when we're building an international system? And then secondly, blockchain is really expensive. So we can't, store all types of information in this warehouse. We need to pick out what's the most important thing that we want to securely store in this warehouse. And then, as I mentioned, blockchain doesn't address all challenges when you think about other technologies. And lastly, does many blockchain not the blockchain? As you know, there's quite a lot of hype around blockchain. So how can we pick what's the most robust way of doing this? What's the gold standard way of developing the blockchain-based system? So last slide is the progress today. So we have gone through a request for information with existing service providers and trying to understand what are the capabilities out there, what are the legal, technical, governance considerations we have to think through when we try to develop the warehouse. Internally, we're also working with the IT team to develop the functional specifications, and we're hoping to finalize this in the summer. And then ongoing collaboration we have is with the IT team, the Technology and Innovation Lab, where we're developing this prototype that I just presented. And we are also having this ongoing collaboration with Chile as well. They have their own blockchain pilot where they're looking at how they can generate mitigation outcomes from renewable energy programs and then storing it in a blockchain-based national registry. So by COP25, we're hoping to demonstrate how potentially their registry could be linked to the warehouse. And also in September during the UNSG, we also have a soft launch to demonstrate again what it could look like, a mock-up of what it would look like. So that's me for now. If there's any clarification questions, let me know. If not, we can leave it to the end as well.
Thanks, Rachel. That was very insightful. I really love the warehouse concept, so I'm always fascinated to listen to it. So, with that, my name is Marco, and I would like to work you through the work that we're doing at the Blockchain for Climate Foundation. And we have the ambition, and it's a big one, to put the Paris Agreement on the blockchain. And with that being said, how do we want to make the Paris Agreement actually workable? We see the biggest contribution that we can do to the Paris Agreement by enabling voluntary cooperation between parties, and that is enabled by Article 6, that is seeking to enable cross-border collaboration between parties and enabling global mitigation in a very cost-efficient manner. In this endeavor, we found blockchain technology as a very important and helpful tool, as it is, as Rachel already introduced briefly, a tool that can improve transparency, reduce borders and accessibility, enable for it, and then also make carbon trading more trackable and provide further information on the token applicability. We decided to use the Ethereum blockchain for this endeavor, as it is a public blockchain that is very much in line with the ethos of the Paris Agreement of a decentralized and transparent technology. So, how are we going to do this? We need to, in order to enable cooperation between parties, we need to make Article 6.2 and 6.4 operational, and that needs to be done by making or connecting the national carbon accounts into and build a process layer for it, so that mitigation outcomes can be transferred from one party to another. So it is basically the international transfer in the international transfer of mitigation outcomes, the ITMOs. For this, we aim to build a platform that is enabling these trades by 2020, rather than pushing it further to 2025 to 2023, which is currently often debated. And at this point, I would also like to emphasize that when we're talking about a post-2020 carbon market, we are talking about the future and about a carbon market that will be existing for ideally 30 years or more. And when we're talking about the future, we have to consider how the future will look like. No one knows how it will look like, but it won't be based on conventional database systems. I think that's quite clear. So if we're looking at carbon markets, a lot of these conventional markets are running on conventional database systems, and they are operating fine so far, and they are probably operating smoother than if we would put a blockchain in, and because there will be glitches, and it is an infant technology that needs to mature over time. But it is also a technology that will enable a lot of support for other technologies in the future. So when we're saying blockchain, we're not only talking about like a database structure, but about a platform for emerging technologies like IoT sensors and also other technology or other applications like machine learning. And that is something we have to consider if we're designing a future system, because otherwise we will settle on a system that might be already technologically outdated once it is incepted in 2020. So what we really want to do is to build a process layer between national carbon accounts. So we want to build a central hub where all the information is stored and transacted in a decentralized fashion, just like Article 6.2 is pointing out. So in order to achieve that, we have like 3 design dimensions that we have to work on. The first one being just the choice which blockchain to use. And Rachel already pointed out that there is not the blockchain, although we are always talking about blockchain, but there are so many of them, and every blockchain has different strengths and weaknesses, so there is not one blockchain that can solve all of it, but we need to understand the use case. We need to look at the requirements from the systems that we are having, and then based on these requirements, we need to apply a specific blockchain solution to it that is suited towards the requirements that the system is posing. And we shouldn't try to just put a blockchain on it and then it will be resolved. So that's a change in approach. I think at the moment we are more using blockchain and then putting it on something and then it will hopefully resolve itself. But I would argue that we need a really problem-oriented approach, and we need to understand the problem and then apply a blockchain solution that's specifically tailored towards the challenge that we're facing. So that being said, we identified through the requirement scoping an Ethereum blockchain type as the most suitable blockchain that we want to use. But we are not using the Ethereum blockchain, but a kind of clone of the Ethereum blockchain. It's really nice with all these open source technologies. You can just take them, you can copy them, and then you can tweak some part or components of the system. So we decided to go with a different consensus mechanism, which is called proof of authority. Ethereum is at the moment based on the proof of work consensus mechanism, which is basically burning energy. That's like Bitcoin, that's the criticism of it, that it uses a lot of energy, it's not efficient at all, it's slow, it's secure, and it basically gets the security from burning a lot of energy. The more energy is burned, the more secure a proof of work system is working. With proof of authority, the beauty is that we are not having competing nodes like in Bitcoin, but we have nodes that are predetermined by a central authority, or by, like for example, the UNFCCC, the CMA, and then the nodes are kind of permissioned. So in our vision, each of the participants of the, or parties of the Paris Agreement would get a node in order to participate in the network, to be able to transact in the network and to secure the network. And that is neat because you have kind of a distributed ownership of the network. So there is no central authority that is running the network, but all parties are working together to secure and maintain the network. And the energy consumption is also a lot lower because you don't have competing nodes that are competing against each other, but all nodes are somewhat aligned, and it's still a very decentralized system and a transparent system. So in order to change something in the system, you need to do a voting mechanism, and you need two-thirds of all parties agreeing to the changes in the network. So it's a very inclusive process in a way. The next design questions that we're facing is on the token architecture, and we have basically two options that we both like in a way. So we started off looking at non-fungible tokens, which means that every token created is unique and has a unique monetary value, if you want to say so. So this is, for example, very applicable if you have carbon markets, you want to link them to each other, and because of different features of the carbon markets, the assets of each carbon market will be priced in a different way. Or also if you want to act on a country level because you want to reward, for example, mitigation outcomes that are created from a country with high emission level, you want to pay more for these mitigation outcomes, and through that you would have a unique value for basically every country mitigation outcome in order to ensure a fairer approach. The alternative is an ERC20 fungible token, which means that the token is basically working like a currency. So each ITMO token would have the same. So it's 1 ton of CO2 that you can use as like a currency to pay off NDC targets in a way, because NDC targets can be understood like budgets, and then you need to insert enough ITMO currency in order to reach this budget. So it's neat in the way that there's no, the complexity is limited. So with each non-fungible token, the market would have to determine a specific value, and then you need to weigh and filter, and it adds a lot of complexity. And with a fungible token, you just know, I want to purchase 100 tons of CO2, so I'll go to the market and buy them for a set price. So I'm happy to receive feedback on what you think is the better application of it, because we're divided between it, and I think it will be mainly depending on political choice, also how the system will be ending up. It's quite difficult or working on Article 6 because there are options outlined, but the negotiations are stalled and there's still a lot of uncertainty around the topic. So I already talked about the token architecture to some degree, but I would like to go a little bit more into depth and why it is good to have a token. I actually don't know if we should call it token because it's like a very nerdy blockchain specific vocabulary, and I think it also has a repellent effect on a lot of people, but token, I will stick to it now. And the arguments why we want to use a token is that you can make each ITMO, and by creating ITMO tokens, you can make each of them individual and trackable by providing specific information on the token. So for example, on a token, you could store metadata, like the country of origin, what's the host country, the sectoral scope, in which sector was the token generated, what's the name of the project. Vintage is very interesting, so you would make a timestamp when the token is entering the network, and that is very important in terms of accountability, because you have a lot of windows now which you have to provide, mitigate, or when your NDC targets are, and the NDC targets between countries vary widely. So this might be a way of being able to specifically attribute tokens based on a timestamp to specific timeframes. But that's again an issue that needs to be addressed at a political level more. There should be also an individual token number or ID, because probably at some point we will run out of project numbers and we need something to make them uniquely identifiable. Like Rachel stated already earlier, we would also store the bigger documents in a central repository, so offline of the blockchain, and would just provide a link to these documents. Because blockchain is, you want to keep it light, because otherwise the network is getting too heavy, and it doesn't make sense to store PDF files or images on the blockchain, because you can just refer to them in the UFCCC, and then it's fine. It's really about just being able to identify which token was transferred from which country to another and enable the entire traceability of it. And then we are also looking at a potential linkage to a warehouse mechanism, or also try to make the system interoperable between different mechanisms and national and subnational systems to address the double counting issues to a certain degree. So blockchain can make different systems interoperable in an easier fashion. And the third design question that we're facing, or the third item that we're working on, is an ITMO dashboard, where it will be possible to apply kind of a filter towards the ITMO. So if I'm a country and I would like to buy sector-specific tokens, or I would like to buy tokens that support a specific SDG or something, the idea is that you can provide a filter in this dashboard, and that it allows you to just be able to filter out all the ITMO tokens that would satisfy your requirements, and then you could purchase them through that. And this is really important because at the moment, particularly within Article 2, it's the country's responsibility. So both countries that are involved in the transaction, they are responsibility in the first place for ensuring that the unit quality is sufficient. And so countries need to have access to the full information, because otherwise I, as a buying country, I couldn't say if the unit quality, I would be relying, depending on what the hosting country is telling me. But with this structure, I could go and really look at the specific information and identify the specific ITMO, link it to the documents, and I would have access to all the information that is necessary for me to do my due diligence, and so that we're not ending up with unsatisfactory quality. And it is to be expected that with a kind of lack of guidelines at the moment, that the quality of ITMOs will be varying quite widely. So there will be definitely good and bad, and being able to distinguish between the two will be really key to do that. So now I outlined what we're kind of working on, but it's really important for us to emphasize that we really want to work in a co-creative manner. So we try to develop suggestions and inform practitioners about the trade-offs and assumptions that we're doing, get feedback on it, and then develop this pilot infrastructures that we are developing together with parties specifically, because in the end it will be the parties that will decide if our technology will be adopted and if it's user-friendly. And so it is really important that we provide kind of a pilot, so to have a platform for discussions and receive feedback on it. But we are really looking to develop our products further in close collaboration with parties. So our timeline is basically like Rachel's, so that we want to have a demonstration by the by COP25 in Chile, and also maybe by the Climate Action Summit be able to present something there. So we are also currently trying to build a national party working group, so we're discussing with national parties if they would be willing to test our pilots and provide feedback on it. Because as I said, we really need the feedback, we need to understand what countries are comfortable with, we need to understand and address the reservations. And I mean, we are all here working with a very new technology, so we are all here to learn, and we will have problems on the way, and we need to figure that out together so that we can both and all benefit from it. So if you happen to know any national party that might be interested, please feel free, and let's talk. And one last slide is about who we actually are. the Blockchain for Climate Foundation. So we're a 17-person team working in the sectors of advisory, climate, blockchain, energy, and governance. And we are focused on North America in our location. Our founder, Joseph Pelland, he's also developing currently the National Registry of Canada and testing a blockchain application towards that. So that's where we're coming from, kind of. I myself am based in Copenhagen, so I'm kind of the outlier of the team. Another request is that so far we have been largely self-funded, which is a nice way for us because we could be very fast and nimbly in our way, so we didn't have to apply any time towards proposal funding writing. But if you happen to know anyone who has philanthropic dollars and is looking for beating climate change, please let me know. So with that, I would like to thank you. And again, if you happen to know a party that would be interested in engaging, if you know anyone with philanthropic dollars, or if you're just up for nerding around about blockchain, then let's talk. Thank you.
Thanks Richard and Marco for the previous sharing. And here I want to share how we use blockchain technology to do some application. And we are doing this for the voluntary carbon market. We hope to use our platform, the VR trade platform, to make the carbon trading more convenient and we can streamline the whole process. We focus on the global market, but in this presentation, I want to emphasize how we use this platform to create more opportunity for climate action in developing countries. I think that's the most important thing right now. And after the presentation, when I have time, I want to show some our page of the website. I'm the CEO of Synergy Blockchain Technology based in Beijing, and we focus to use on blockchain in the climate action field. And we are a member of the China Energy Conservation Association and also a member of CCC Climate Change Coalition. And as you know, right now China is the most biggest CO2 emitter of the world and also one of the largest carbon credit developers in the developing country. I think it's very important for us to present the innovation, climate information from China's private sector. In my experience, right now in developing countries, it's very, very hard to promote the concept of climate action. People in developing countries, most of they're thinking about environmental protection. They're looking about how to prevent their home from the polluted air, toxic water, and other related to chemical materials. But regarding the climate action, they will say that it's all developed countries' responsibility. People will feel when they suffer from the extreme winter, or they will say we need to do something to do carbon neutral. Most of the people, they have no idea about the CO2 can change the world and global warming, and they have no idea. So, for example, if you want to promote this idea without incentive, people will not listen to you because in developed countries, the economic growth is still everybody's top priority. So if we want to do something like, we need to create some incentive. So now we only rely on the government action. Now in China, we have a 9 pilot ETS system. And in that kind of system, yes, government put a very strong hand. So especially in China, we can really do something and with strong enforcement. And besides that, people hardly, or the companies, individuals, hardly to do carbon neutralization by themselves. You still need a time to accumulate more carbon neutral cases, no matter in the individual or for company. Besides the region of the ETS, you cannot expect that people will voluntarily doing this. We don't have that kind of social ultimate sphere. So we need to create a social sphere. The way we want to do it, we shouldn't do in this kind of scientific way. We should do this kind with a marketing way. Like how we promote doing something good behavior, like charity, donate money to poor people, to the poor rural family. We need to use a similar marketing way to promote the idea of climate action. And if the global climate action without the participation from the developing country, I don't think we can get a concrete result, because most of CO2 emission from developing country. So no matter how hard we do it in developed country, sorry, it's a long way to go to attain the Paris Agreement goal. So that's why we create a business model we call it's a VR platform. We use this platform and to trade carbon credit, and we use our environmental cryptocurrency ECO2 token to let people in the world they can trade the carbon credit, and no matter from any country and any kind of carbon credit they want to buy, any kind of quantity they want to buy, they can use cryptocurrency to trade just right away. So far, the trading process takes too long, and then also it's hard to find the buyer, or sometimes the buyer cannot find a suitable supplier. We think in the modern time of internet network, we should do something like the internet. If we buy an iPhone, you need to send email to Apple. I want to buy an iPhone. Can you send me the purchase order? I don't think iPhone will be so popular right now. We want to use internet to share this, and also it will be easier for people to do carbon neutral. We don't know how hard you can buy carbon credit in developed country. In China, it's impossible, because if you want to buy something, you need to go to the government's ETS exchange. But you need to register with so many documents. It's a fully regulated market. But with token, you can just send the token to the project proponent, project holder. They can do the carbon neutral for you by your name and got the token. So we can speed up all the process. So why we use the token to do the climate action? With the token, people will automatically share their idea. Have you seen any organization promote Bitcoin in the beginning? No. But why the whole cryptocurrency market has been reached $800 billion on last January. It's much bigger than the carbon market, include the carbon market. Why? People will automatically share this idea. It has contagious. They can get incentive. Why? Because more people to buy, and more money they can get. We want to use this idea to create community based on the blockchain network. Right now in China, we have many WeChat groups talking about our EcoTrue token and our VR trade platform. We don't do this in a very active way. People will automatically share this idea because they want to get more money, yes. But at the same time, when people buying token, they want to know what the meaning behind this. So we use this way to transmit, broadcast this idea in different countries. People have the reason to know climate action, and also have an incentive to broadcast this idea. And most important things, at this moment, I think we have thousands of people already hold our token, and they are all very willing to spend part of the token they have to carbon neutral action. That's the most important thing. So if we can get success in China, as an example for the developing country, I think The same model maybe we can use in India, Brazil, Russia, other developed countries, or maybe in United States, Europe, maybe. So I think the blockchain can truly create a bottom-up consensus. I think that's the concept from the Paris Agreement. But right now, the bottom-up of Paris Agreement only reach to each country. Maybe plus the NACCA, we can say we reach some organization, enterprise. But sorry, we didn't reach it to individual. But we have to remember one thing. Even all the countries fulfill their pledge of NDC, we still have a big emission gap. I remember it's 13 to 15 gigatons CO2 emission per year. So no matter how hard we work in national level, in enterprise level, without individual participate in climate action, I don't think we can have get very strong result for prevent the temperature increase. We use the blockchain network to form these people voluntarily to buy the carbon credit, no matter for transmit the carbon credit or to do the carbon neutralization. And enterprise individual, they can use auction way or fixed price to buy. With auction way, they can find the ideal market price. And they can do this instant and directly to anyone, anywhere in the world. We want to do this, we also provide a certificate. And also on our website, we will show an honorable board who already done this, which kind of enterprise already do carbon neutral for the eco reputation, which person, celebrity, some kind of celebrity in China, they already promised us that they want to be a leader, pioneer, to convince more ordinary people to join with this global climate action. And we want people use the certificate to share in the social media. It's impossible you can share then the data in the APX, in the market database. People in China, they cannot understand English. Not to mention about their kind of complicated mechanism, it's them to log in to find the data, yes, I'm doing carbon neutral. No, we hope you use just a beautiful certificate to share this information on Facebook or in China, in WeChat. More people will know about this and what that means, and we hope to create kind of social atmosphere about climate action. So we don't expect the developed country will buy carbon credit from developed country. It's impossible. Or from even it's hard to ask them to buy carbon credit from foreign country. But at least we can promote it, one idea. We can promote it doing the regional carbon neutral action. There are some programs in China doing some precisely poverty alleviation. Local government spend money to let the rural family, poor family, doing some kind of environmental protection, like reforestation. That kind of program could also generate carbon credit. We can use our platform to ask local companies, local volunteers to purchase their local carbon credit, which will bring this kind of concept as the regions of the developed country. Maybe at least you can offset your own regional carbon emission. For that, we need a platform provide them can upload some specific standard for that kind of content